Roquero. So moving on, let's continue the discussion and let's talk about the lesson 2, which talks about typology of bilingual education programs. So when we say typology, it is the study of classification and types. So basically, we will talk about the types or classification of bilingual education programs. But before that, before we proceed with our lesson proper, let's play a game first. So this game is called Building Your Vocabulary. So what I want you guys to do, I want you to look for a partner. And then there will be a certain words that will be flashed here. And then I want you guys to define it in your own words. So if you have now a partner, so let's continue. Next slide. Okay, so the next slide are words or some common terms used in bilingualism and bilingual education. So these are the first 3 words that you need to define on your own together with your partner. So I will give you at least a minute to discuss, and then please make sure that you guys are prepared because I will, after a minute, I will discuss, I will call you randomly. All good? Okay, now let's proceed. So the first word we have monolingualism. Yes, Mr. Albert.
For us, with Ms. Jimenez, monolingualism from the word itself, mono means one. Also, basically, it is a speaker speaking only one language.
Okay, so that is actually a precise definition of that. So when we say monolingualism, it is the ability of a certain person to speak and understand one language. Now let's talk about majority language. Yes, Ms. Asarani.
Majority language is the language that is used in the majority or the minority.
Okay, so yeah, that explains the majority language. But to add more information about it, when we say majority language, she's correct. It talks about the majority of the people in a population or in a certain country or in a region of a country who speaks the majority of the language. So in the context of multilingualism, when we say majority language, it is generally considered as the high-class language. Now, in minority language, let's have Ms. Bagloso.
So, minority language is a language
Okay, so yeah, that's actually correct. So when we say minority language, it is the complete opposite of the majority language, and it was explained by Ms. Bagloso earlier, so that is the concise definition of this. So these are the first 3 words of the common terms that is being used in bilingualism and bilingual education, and the following 3 words will be discussed as well by Ms. Aira. There you go, everyone. It seems like you have an overview about our discussion today. But before that, Mr. Lozano, can you tell me what is bilingualism for you?
For me, bilingualism, a person who acquires 2 languages or learns 2 languages.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for that. That's when we say bilingualism, it is the ability of a certain person to speak or understand 2 languages fluently. Now, let's talk about bilingual education. Ms. Jimenez, can you share your idea about bilingual education?
For me, bilingual education, it involves teaching Tagalog and 2 languages.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. So yeah, when we say bilingual education, it is a system of teaching that incorporates 2 languages as a medium of instruction. So aiming to educate students in both languages simultaneously. So basically, in other words, when we say bilingualism, it is the outcome. And when we say bilingual education, it is a system or method used to achieve it. So next one, okay, so let's proceed. Ms. Shahana, can you read?
provides a summary of the broad types of language programs for bilingual. The typology of bilingual education programs has 10 types and are classified into monolingual forms of education for bilinguals, weak form of bilingual education, and strong forms of bilingual education. In this lesson, we will only focus on the monolingual form and the weak form of the language program for bilingual.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. So according here, we will only, in this lesson, we will only focus on the monolingual forms and then the weak forms. So that is the content of the discussion today. So next slide. So when we say monolingual forms of education for bilinguals, can you tell me what is your thought about it? Yes, Mr. Sakuri. Do you have any idea? Can you? Okay, anyone? Yes, Mr. Mahat. Just an idea. There is no right or wrong answer. You can speak your mind.
May own idea. Okay, may own idea. In example, whenever I usually speak two languages or more than two languages, so I consider myself as a bilingual person. So since we are talking about education, so whenever I go to school and talk with my teacher or my schoolmates or classmates rather, we only use one language, which in that form I became a monolingual person.
Okay, so thank you for that insight. So let's check if it is close to what it states here. So can you read it, Miss Rochelle?
Monolingual forms of education for bilingual educational approaches that prioritize instruction on one language, typically the dominant language, despite the education in another language.
Okay, so the focus, regardless, in a classroom setup, regardless of how many languages you are able to speak, but if that does not, align with the language, set in an educational system, you don't have a choice but to study the language of the language being used as a medium of instruction in the educational system. So in the context of Philippine education, guys, to give you a clear and concise example, so we are, in the context of Philippine education, we are labeled as a multilingual or a bilingual for some bilingual country for some reason. What do you think is the reason why? What do you think is the reason why? We are commonly labeled as a bilingual country. That was answered in yes, go ahead.
I think because we have two official languages, which is the Philippine and English.
Okay, so yeah, that's correct. And if you can recall, guys, the topics that we discussed in the coverage of the first semester, or in the midterm coverage, what is the language situation of the Philippines? Exactly. So that answers the question here. So we are labeled as automatically we are labeled as a bilingual country because the language situation in the Philippines is multilingual. So yeah, the aim actually for monolingual forms of education, this is to promote proficiency and literacy of the learners to be exposed in more dominant language in an educational system. So ensuring that academic success and integrating a mainstream society for everybody. So next slide. Okay, so in monolingual form forms of education, we have three approaches. So these are the following. Now, we will discuss detail by detail on each word of these approaches, because I want you guys to listen, because after this discussion, you will answer 3 questions, so using the same group. So when we say mainstreaming, in the first approach, it only talks about bilingual students are placed in a classroom alongside with a monolingual peers. So basically combine that. And when we say submersion, it is a classroom setup where students' native language cannot be seen as, as used for or fit to use for a medium of instruction. So basically, the medium of instruction in this classroom setup is foreign to them. So say for example, here in the classroom, if you are a Filipino and you cannot speak English at all, so that is not the problem of the education system. It is your problem. So here, it is emphasized here, okay? So it is emphasized here that the student should work alone to know the language being used as a medium of instruction. So either you can swim or sing. So it is expected as well that the student should adjust to the environment, because they are preparing you for a better living in the future, because they are they are seen as the medium of the language used for a medium of instruction as a standard set by society. Could it be in education, could it be in employment? So yeah. And letter B, mainstreaming submersion. So it is different, but it was added withdrawal classes and shorter English. So when we say withdrawal classes, it is the ability of a teacher to pull out students from a classroom. Say for example, in this classroom, almost the minority of the students or the minority language does not have an idea on speaking the language and understanding the language at all. So as an alternative, the teacher will pull you out. So those who cannot understand the language, the teacher will pull you out and provide you a specialized instruction. Say for example, if here in the Philippines, our language or the LOI, the language of instruction, or the medium of instruction is English. So if 5 of you cannot understand English, the teacher has the ability to pull you out and then offer you a special, or an alternative. Yeah, an alternative. Say for example, for ESL, it is a course that you need to take for you to be exposed in the language used. So you can take ESL, English as a second language course, and that way you will be more. So moving on, hindi ka na mahihirapan para mag-catch up. And when we say sheltered English, it is actually somehow the same with withdrawal classes, because here it involves teaching the content purely in English, but you will adjust your instructional materials, or you will adjust your approach depending on the IQ or the level of intelligence of your student. Say for example, I am giving you instruction in English and you cannot understand some parts of or the words in that instruction. So I need to look for another word or term that I can use in order for you to understand that. So that is sheltered English. Now when we say segregationists, now does anyone of you has an idea about this? Yes, Ms. Patloso.
I think the segregation program, that's anti-bilingual education, diba? So here, my partner in Sabah, segregation is it is a way of the majority languages are actually taking down the minority languages. Parang dinidisregard nila yung minority languages for the sake of early, para yung mga tao, officially na na-English na yung gagawin nila. Or yung dominant na language, yun na talaga yung
Okay, so thank you so much for that. And Ms. Mendoza. Do you agree with that, Mr. Alvarez?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ms. Mendoza has stated. So to make it simpler, like the word itself, segregation is, it's like segregation of trash, for example, separating the biodegradable to non-biodegradable. So when we say it, when we put it into the language, it is separation of majority language to minority language. For example, here in the classroom, the majority language spoken here is Filipino and the minority is English. So it is being segregate or separate.
Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for that, Mr. Alvarez. So I think I don't need to explain further about that because they provided a concrete example as well. So now moving on to the next level. So I want you guys to take note of these choices. You can do a picture of this because it is your choices for the short quiz on the next time. So I want you guys to take a picture with the same group, okay? Same group. Okay, tapos na? Naka-picture na? Okay, next time. So these are the following questions. So I will give you at least 2 to 3 minutes to answer this. Okay, so I guess all the papers are here now. So the answer key for this is and that concludes the topic of the lesson 2. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that you learned something.
So good day everyone, I am Fatima Ering and I will be the one to discuss the weak forms of bilingual education for bilinguals. So in bilingual, weak forms of bilingual education for bilinguals, we have 3 components or 3 classified components by Bakers. He formulated these 3 weak forms as a basis in which category the students must be aligned with. So, first program, we have transitional. Next, we have the mainstream with foreign language teaching. And lastly, we have the separatists. So now let's proceed to the first question. The first question here indicated that the program provides initial instruction in the student's first language and instruction in the first language is spaced out over time. It is highly criticized because it is remedial, compensatory, and segregated, where the language minority children are separated from the mainstream. It perpetuates divides the higher class and lower class language minority children in this case. So when we say transitional program, it actually aligns with the criticisms often labeled as remedial or compensatory bilingual education programs. These programs are actually aligned to address the language needs of the students who are not proficient in the dominant language of instruction. However, they can unintentionally perpetuate social divides and segregation by separating language minority children to the mainstream educational environment rather. So, just like for example, just imagine a bilingual education program where students receive instruction primarily in their native language. Let's just say Spanish or Japanese before gradually transitioning to instruction in English. So in this scenario, students may be separated and segregated from the English-speaking peers, which could reinforce socioeconomic disparities. Additionally, if the quality of education is in a native language, instruction is perceived as lower than in the dominant language, it can further marginalize what do you call this? Language minority students. It mainly in creating a divide between those who receive high quality education in a dominant language and those who do not. So overall, while bilingual education programs aims to support language minority students, it is crucial to implement them in a way that fosters integration, equal access to resources and opportunities for all students regardless of language background. So that is how the transitional program defined it. The next question we have, the language minority deliberately separates themselves excuse me, from the language majority where monolingualism in the minority language is fostered, which results into the limited bilingualism among the language minority. So in this question, we can obviously relate to the separate word. So in this question, it is typically determined the separatist program. Indeed, the language minority can actually happen. That can actually happen when a language minority community consciously maintains its language and culture separates from the majority language, and this can actually lead to limited bilingualism within the minority group. So when it leads to a limited bilingualism within the minority group, as they prioritize their own language over learning the majority language. Basically, in other words, it is when situations where the minority group is deliberately trying to distance themselves or its members from the strong influence of the mainstream society in order to protect its native language and culture and also their religion. That is what separatist program is. In third question, we have the majority language children are taught in their home majority language with additional foreign language lessons. The problem with this setup is that relatively few students become competent in the second language. So in this question, since the two of our questions given have answered, so basically this question is has an answer of a mainstream for language for foreign language teaching. So yes, indeed, it is that's a common language education or challenge in language education. While exposure to a foreign language through additional lessons is beneficial, sustain the immersion, integrating, makes more practices, or these are often crucial for achieving proficiency. So integrating more interactive and immersive learning experiences such as language exchanges or cultural activities, this can actually bridge this gap or help bridge this gap. So it is a usual pattern for the mainstream language majority students to study a foreign language for about several hours a week, and which does not actually provide enough exposure and instruction in the second language of the students to become bilingual. So that is what mainstream for foreign language teaching. And I hope guys you have learned something new today.